Hey everybody, welcome to Better Coffee Wednesdays, where the idea is that every Wednesday we can provide you some insight and some knowledge about specialty coffee and coffee in general to help you make better coffee at home. So today we are going to talk about Arabica. If you are new to coffee, you probably see everywhere 100% Arabica. If you go to the Green Mermaid, you might see that a lot of their coffees are Arabica only, and they kind of make this designation of Arabica. So if you're not familiar, there's another coffee called Robusta, which used to be the primary coffee that was grown and sourced for quite a long time. So let's look at Robusta first and get into why Arabica has kind of taken over. So Robustas are very robust, hence the name, that they can grow in most any condition. They're very resilient against disease and they produce a lot of yield. So an average Arabica tree will produce 1 pound of finished roasted coffee a year. Robustas probably do double that, if not more, and they're very resistant to disease. However, you will probably note that a lot of people in the coffee industry feel that Robustas just don't have the flavor, or they taste very foul, they're just not that great, etc. But that may not entirely be true. So let's talk, how did we go from using Robustas into Arabicas? Well, Arabicas are actually a child of Robusta. Robusta and another plant got cross-pollinated, another coffee plant I should say, got cross-pollinated and created Arabica. Now Arabica and Robusta are just two of 123 different types of coffee genuses of plants throughout the coffee kingdom, or whatever you want to call it. So these are just the two that are most predominantly used today. However, Arabica has now kind of dominated the scene, and the reason for that is mostly its flavor. So with Arabicas, we get these really beautifully sweet, complex, and amazing coffees with still a pretty decent yield. So you may have heard of the geisha coffee, which is kind of the prized coffee these days, especially in the coffee world. Geishas, they are even more flavorful, more complex, crazy, amazing coffees, but they just don't produce that much actual yield or coffee. So Arabica has kind of come to dominate the market. Now in the United States, most coffee that is consumed is Arabica. So if you go to the Green Mermaid, you go to most mom and pop shops, in most third wave or specialty coffee shops, you are going to see Arabica kind of dominate their coffee offerings. Now, one thing that's interesting about Arabica is that we have really learned to kind of cultivate Arabica. We have worked to find different variations of Arabica that work in different soils across the country that work a little bit better. This is also now happening in the geisha world too, which is kind of the next level from Arabica to geisha. And what we're doing now is we're taking plants that have been very successful in other farms and then seeding them in other soils to see how they do in those soils. The terroir, as it's called, as you may be familiar with, like in the wine industry, definitely plays an impact in how a coffee can taste and the final product of that coffee. So people are really now trying to take those Arabicas and plant them in different conditions and find the right Arabica for their specific farm. Now, one of the reasons that Robusta was so popular is that not only does it, like the things you mentioned earlier, disease resistant, it produces a lot of coffee, it also produces a lot of caffeine. So the caffeine that you get from a Robusta is going to be a lot stronger, or there's just going to be more of it, I should say, than in an Arabica. So this was also kind of one of the popular reasons that Robustas have been were kind of one of the first coffees to be cultivated. Now, when Robusta and the other, I can't think of the actual scientific name, but when those two plants kind of married and created the Arabica, the nice thing about Arabica is that if the coffee is fresh, we still get a really nice balance of caffeine. So it still has a strong caffeine content, but it has all the flavor characteristics of its other parent. So the mother side kind of gave the Arabica all of its flavors, where we got a lot of some of the other benefits like the yield, maybe a little bit stronger disease resistance from the Robusta. What's interesting about Robusta is that it's kind of coming full circle. Now we're starting to see some producers are looking at Arabica and saying like, hey, or Robusta, is that, hey, with Arabica, we've learned that a lot of times if an Arabica tree just isn't producing that great of coffee, it's probably down to our farming techniques. We probably aren't taking care of the soil, we aren't treating it right. I'm not a farmer, so there's probably a lot of other things that go into it, but the industry as a whole has realized, yeah, maybe it's our fault because we're not cultivating it right and helping it to be the best it can be. So now we see some farmers kind of coming back to the idea of a Robusta and saying, hey, maybe if we actually cultivate this coffee and help it kind of be the best it can be, we can produce some really amazing coffees. So that is our Coffee Tip Wednesday. Arabica kind of dominates, mostly because of its flavor characteristics. Even if you don't really take care of it that well, you still can create a pretty great coffee on its own just by kind of letting it be wild. It also gets some of the disease resistance and yield from its Robusta father, and then some of the great flavoring that we get from the mother side. And so that's kind of what has pushed Arabica into the forefront of being the coffee that we see everywhere. So I hope you enjoyed this. Come back if you like this and you want to get more coffee tips every Wednesday. Just click the subscribe button and then hit the little notification bell, and you'll kind of see the next Coffee Tip Wednesday. As always, coffee, pedal, repeat. We'll see you next time.